For the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 178.PR0516, certificate number 27217. Canal Mania.
Oh, I sing a theme deserving praise, a theme of great renown, sir. The ship Canal in Manchester, that rich and trading town.
I know you like Inglang. You and your wife go to Inglang all the time.
Not all the time, but when we can get away.
Regulars.
We've been once this year. More than regulars. Not more than regular British people.
No, true.
They go there a lot.
True.
I mean, they go to Ibiza more, but...
I bet you there are people in Scotland and Ireland who haven't been to Inglang this year.
Probably not.
And yet you have.
I've been to Scotland, too.
See?
I haven't been to Wales or Northern Ireland.
More than regulars. You don't go to Wales that often.
Well, I've been to Wales once.
That seems like an oversight.
I really want to... One of the reasons why I want to start spending more time based out of the UK is just because I'll feel like, let's take the weekend and go to Cornwall.
Cornwall, famously in Wales.
For example. Or, let's go back to Yorkshire. Let's go to the Lake District. Let's go to Wales.
John O'Groats.
It's a good jumping... John O'Groats?
Yeah.
Is that a guy? Is he going to take me there? Is he like my driver?
It's also a place, John O'Groats.
Oh, I thought he was like just some dumb Kevin guy.
He was once.
John O'Groats fell in the well again. Go get the bucket.
John O'Groats is like in Scotland.
Imagine getting the worst tarot card and it's like John O'Groats.
Oh, I got the John O'Groats. No, John O'Groats is the furthest in the northeast you can go in the British Isles. And then, you go from John O'Groats down to Penzance or something, and I'm talking about this from the standpoint of someone who might possibly want to walk across Inglang.
But not across, down if you want to go from
you could
John
walk,
O'Groats to Penzance.
You could walk up to John O'Groats.
True.
From Penzance.
I've walked across Yorkshire for a week. It's pretty nice.
It's nice. You walk along. You go, oh, yeah.
It's good walking country.
Here we are. Yeah, it's good walking country.
Because they have all the right-of-ways and
paths.
Turns. There's a lot of styles.
You do go through a lot of styles. It keeps, I guess, cows out from one side to the next.
I feel like in the U.S., you can live your whole life, never go through a single style. In the U.K.?
Well, you need to go through them if you're going on a New York City subway.
Yeah, I guess. You think a turnstile is the same?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
It turns. It's right in the name.
Yeah, but that's why it's a turnstile.
I see what you're saying.
If you were in a pasture, you wouldn't be like, hey, look at that turnstile. A turnstile is an urban style.
An urban style.
And I know quite a bit about urban style.
You do?
I do. I've got my fashion line.
You do now. Oh, do you ever think maybe one day you'll have your own Johnny Carson sort of suits?
Is that even a thing anymore?
Suits by Ken?
I think I missed it by 30 years.
No, I bet you Diddy. It's that. It's hip hop artists have their own clothing
lines.
But
it's not TV hosts the way it might once have been.
The thing is, don't fight the last war, Ken. Fight the next war.
Maybe all game show hosts will have it. It's going to be Seacrest or me, so.
Or maybe it's just you.
Yeah.
Maybe the way that your stylists are still putting you in skinny jeans and small collared J. Crew shirts you'll continue, even as the kids get into Junkos with chain wallets and like pacifiers.
Just like how Johnny Carson was still selling big checks in like 1983.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like, no, this is eternal style.
Do you think Steve Harvey has a fashion line?
If he doesn't, it's a massive oversight.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, here we go.
Does he?
H by Steve Harvey, a collection of seasonless, timeless, and effortlessly elegant menswear.
It's like suit jackets with 11 buttons.
And they're bright purple. The vents are huge. A collection of seasonless and timeless means this stuff has never been fashionable, I think.
But that means that he can sell it. He can sell last year's stock next year, and no one will notice.
It does mean that there is one game show host at least with a fashion line.
What about Ryan Seacrest? Doesn't he have like his own set of puka shell necklaces and slip-on Vans or whatever it is that characterize that guy? Not his own style, eh?
At Walmart, you can shop the Ryan Seacrest Distinction catalog.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, there seem to be some slacks here.
Yeah, there you go. Ken, you're not far. This is how you're going to monetize this otherwise charity gig that you're doing hosting Jeopardy.
Right, I'm going to make it up on the merchandising.
Yep. That's how you do. But in going to England, you've done a lot of you've done a lot of the conventional sort of go to the museums tour, but you've also done some adventure touring. You've walked across Yorkshire. Have you ever considered renting a canal boat?
We have, there's parts of London where, if you walk through Hackney or Camden, there's plenty of parts of London where the canals are still front and center. And I think some of those old boats there, maybe you can rent and stay there as like an Airbnb. I don't know.
You absolutely can.
I've done that in Amsterdam. I've never thought of doing it in London. I've walked along, I think I told this once on the show. I was on Manchester once for the day and just started walking because what do you do in Manchester?
Right.
They have a Ferris wheel now, but why?
Every city that's trying to figure out a reason is trying to throw something up.
We're the city with a Ferris wheel in the middle.
Did you go to the Creation Records headquarters?
I should have. I don't know. Is there still music?
I feel like they tore everything down like they always do.
Is there still Manchester tourism? I don't know.
There's got to be.
Probably.
Well, especially now that Oasis is back together, there's got to be.
Things are looking up.
Yeah, let's go to Manchester and see if we can see a thing.
I just started to kind of wander away from the Ferris wheel in hopes that would, and I wound up next to a canal, and I just started following the canal, and it kind of got me out into the exurbs. I started to get out into the country, and this amazingly elaborately built canal with locks every so often. Not a few little boats tied, but nobody using it, and no sign that anybody had recently or would soon. And it was kind of my first introduction to the fact that much of the UK, especially near industrial points, is just riddled with these capillaries of little canals. Each kind of run down in their way now, I think.
Yeah, well, the theme of today's show is those canals.
There we go. We finished. We're done.
There it is. And well done us.
I walked along one, and that's about all there is to say.
Yeah.
It's do you see canal? Have you been on a canal boat anywhere in the UK?
No, but I don't know if I've ever told you about my own experiences walking across the United Kingdom as part of a larger project.
I didn't remember that Britain was included in your project.
It was because I started, I got the cheapest airfare I could to Europe. This is back when England was considered part of Europe.
That's kind of their fault.
Yeah, and so the cheapest ticket at the time was to Heathrow. And I decided that when I stood up from my seat, which would have been row 75 at the time, before I had any money or any ability to do anything but sit in the seat by the toilet.
By the restroom.
I stood up from my chair and I said, "That's it. I'm walking from now on." And so I didn't take the escalator and I didn't take the movable walkway.
But you took a boat or a train, I assume, to the continent.
Well, yes, technically.
But you walked. Isn't that?
I walked around the deck.
Isn't that the same kind of conveyance as an escalator?
Well,
just
no, it's
writ
not.
large.
It's not because there's no other. You can't walk across the ocean, but you can walk through an airport.
You can walk down an escalator. Doesn't that? It'd be fewer steps.
No, you're being helped. You're being helped by an unnecessary conveyance, whereas a boat is a necessary one. I mean, I could have swam, or swum, but
People have done it.
I walked out the door of Heathrow, and the thing about an airport that you don't think about when you're in airports or leaving airports is that they aren't really built to walk to or from.
Correct.
And so walking out the door of Heathrow and walking along the driveway out to the trunk road, I was like, it was many, many miles. The first walking that I ever did on the trip was just walking along like a frontage road
Hounslow.
by Heathrow, which is the
most
biggest
beautiful-
airport in ye olde
It's the
England.
most beautiful part of Britain.
But I did eventually find my way to a canal, and this was the canal up through Enfield, and walked along it for kind of a full day up to Waltham Abbey. And
The monks put you up.
they didn't. But there was a very nice man who had an Airbnb, but it wasn't an Airbnb because that
was
didn't
not a
exist
thing.
then.
It could have been a B&B.
It was a B&B.
Air had not been invented yet.
His name was Alan.
Oh,
Now
yeah?
that I'm remembering.
Two
And
L's?
no, it was ALAN.
Okay.
And he and Mike
Because in the UK, sometimes you get ALUN because they're a little bit freaky there.
But this was a situation. By the time I got there, my feet were really in tatters, really bloody and awful, and he bandaged my feet for me.
It is a monk.
He was a nice gay man who wanted to take care of
Who's into feet.
his young traveler, and he had a very quaint B&B.
That's not a good sign if your first day of
No,
walking.
this was
your
by the
feet
time I
were
got
already
to
bloody.
Enfield or Waltham. I was on day
Oh, okay.
2 or
Day
3.
two, day
3, maybe.
Your feet were already all exposed.
They were pretty
Tissue.
trashed. But this was my first exposure to canals in the UK, and walking along it and realizing that it was threaded through the landscape in a kind of industrial way, inextricable from the factories. Enfield is where they made the Enfield rifle, and so there were at least lots of old factories along the banks of the canal that had made this iconic rifle that the British Empire had used so that the sun never set on it. And there were it was a narrow canal, and lots of little narrow canal boats on it and little
Like the
locks.
Like you have to be a pretty narrow barge to go on a lot of these.
A really narrow barge on some of them. But there was a whole kind of surviving, and I think it was in the process of being resurrected, a sort of canal infrastructure. And I stopped at one point outside of Enfield at a little kind of bargeman's cafe and had a deluxe English breakfast, as you would.
At the Jolly Bargeman.
And it was, it was kind of like it was very much not a fancy, everyone in there was a working class person, and the food was not fancy, and in that sense, it was probably the best English breakfast I ever had.
But it was not for people walking along the canal for whatever reason. It was for people who were still working it in boats.
Yeah, the canal showed signs, this was 1999, showed signs of becoming somewhat of a jogging path.
Right. This is Tony Blair's Britain. This is a new day dawning.
But this part of London had not yet, London outskirts had not yet been completely, well, I'm sure it's $1 billion to live there now. But at the time, a lot of the factories were still there, but abandoned. And it wasn't just a jogging path. There were still working boats and working people. And it really struck me because also in the course of kind of making my way to the coast, I walked along some abandoned railroads too, or railways, and often kind of saw abandoned railways and abandoned canals somewhat in conjunction with one another. And some of the stuff that stands out about that is that there's a lot of sort of 18th century and early 19th century brickwork and not architecture, but landscape architecture that survives in these places, kind of bridges over canals that were designed for horses to walk across.
Oh, the bridge was designed for the horse, not the canal.
Because the original canal boats were all towed by horses.
Yeah.
Who walked alongside. And if the horses were going to cross over to the other side, rather than unhook them, there were kind of these flyover bridges that the horses could could cross over to the other side without unhooking from the barge.
Move the rope to the other side of the bar or whatever it is.
And also, I mean, I saw some railroad bridges that were similarly kind of. I tried to draw one in a journal one time because it was almost like a Mobius strip made of brick.
Well, you don't want to walk on that.
Well, but I was walking under it, so thankfully. But
unless you're like David Bowie as the Goblin King, you're going to fall off that thing.
Here in the U.S., when you see decaying infrastructure, it's usually, at least on the West Coast, I mean, it's decaying infrastructure from the 50s or from the 40s.
Yeah.
Maybe the 30s, right, in the national parks. I guess on the East Coast.
It could be 19th century if you're in upstate New York.
That's the thing, right? If you're in Philadelphia or Baltimore, like I think there's the reason that Amtrak can't go from D.C. to New York in, something like half the time that it does is that there are still some bridges in Baltimore that are so that they can't expand because in order to do it, they'd have to
it's old brick.
Yeah, they'd have to completely wreck the whole system and no one's ever gotten around to just pulling the trigger and we got to rebuild this whole part of town. And so the train has to go 3 miles an hour through this whole section. So there is some of that, but in the UK, you see this enormous physical infrastructure that was built in the 1700s that has fallen into disuse, but it has a kind of beauty and craftsmanship that is, really noticeably from the 1740s or 1760s, and it really stands out because it's been abandoned for decades and decades, and in some cases, 150 years or more.
Well, someday people look the same way at our ugly 20th century stuff. Our future listeners will be like, look at this beautiful 1950s on-ramp. Now in disrepair.
I hate to say it, but for those listeners in the future, and the people listening to this episode are in 2025, and it's entirely possible that between when we record this today and then that the bottom has fallen out of the commercial real estate market across the United States, and all of the 70-story glass office buildings built in 2011 are going to be empty and broken windows and curtains just fluttering in them.
And imagine people thinking that's
wind.
poetic, look at that amazing early 21st century retail park.
So beautiful as these buildings just rust and gradually collapse, full of vampires.
Yeah, mostly vampires.
Ken, I've recently taken a much greater interest in trying to grow my money and trying to invest my money. I went many years without making any provision to grow my money, and mostly it's because I felt like I didn't have any money, and so investing money felt like something far above, literally above my pay grade. Hard to imagine when you are living hand to mouth how you have any money left over to think about putting away or think about trying to grow for your future. And that's what's so exciting and so interesting about today's sponsor. Acorns is an investing platform that allows you to begin putting money away in any increment that you are able. I'm talking about at the level of how much you pay for a latte, how much you're paying for your Netflix subscription. And to make that an automatic process, kind of like we do with so many subscription services in today's world, except in this sense, or in this case, Acorns is going to take that money and invest it for you with the idea that, you kind of forget about it. It's just a thing that is happening automatically, and little by little, you're putting money away with the potential of growing it. And over the course of, I think statistics show, right, that even small amounts of money invested over time can grow to be a really useful amount of money later on in life. And you can start at any time. I'm 56 years old, and I'm really just starting to think about managing my money. Now, I know it's not an issue for you, Ken, because you're a multi-millionaire, but it's three multis. But even you, and I've talked about this quite a bit, you're very prudent with your money, and you have a whole investment strategy. What's funny is here we're in the new year, save more money is the most popular New Year's resolution, even more popular than hit my target weight. So, today's sponsor, Acorns, makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. And you don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you invest with the spare money you've got right now. You can start with $5, even just your spare change. You don't need a ton of time. You can create your Acorns account and start investing in just 5 minutes. Financial wellness is not impossible. Acorns gives you small, simple steps to get you and your money on track. Acorns does the hard part so you can give your money a chance to grow. So head to acorns.com/omnibus or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And now, Ken, I've got to read a little disclaimer. This is a paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorn Advisors, LLC is an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/omnibus. The history of transportation really is a history of horses and boats for the most part.
For a long time. Not so much today.
For a really long time.
Less so today.
Still boats bring us...
Horses.
That's how we get horses.
The horse. Oh, look, Mom, the horse boat is in.
Yeah, they bring them in from the horse islands.
That's right.
How do we get all these horses go out to the horse islands?
Let's go out to Chincoteague and get some horses.
No, the reason that you can dress in your presumably all made in China clothes
my cheap fast fashion
is that there are these enormous ships that can't even go through the Suez Canal. When they go through the Bermuda Triangle, they're not at risk because the bow of the ship is on one side of the Bermuda Triangle and the stern is on the other.
They are bisecting the triangle. All the sailors are quickly running across to try to get to the point that's outside of the spooky zone. Everybody get to the prow.
But if you think about horses and barges and ships, I guess.
This is your Roman Empire. You're thinking about horses and barges.
Horses and barges.
Many times a day.
I'm going to get me some horses and barges. A horse can pull in a cart a couple of tons at most. 1 ton, 2 tons.
Whatever it takes.
A boat can carry more, but you got to load a ship and unload it. But also, a ship can only depart from a port.
A very small number of places.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people are like, I can't have a ship. I live in rainy, wet Seattle. I can't have a ship come to my house.
Not to your house. The thing is, there's maybe partly...
I'm still 10 miles from a deep water port, and I feel like I'm an oceanic person.
And most people do live by the sea, but by the sea is not where, for instance, things are mined. By the sea is not where things are always best manufactured. Things are manufactured quite often along rivers because rivers provide a source of hydroelectric power.
Right.
And much needed sort of water is part of any kind of industrial process.
Much needed water.
Much needed water,
By
and
the
not
sea,
salty
by the
crap
sea, it would be
water.
all salty water,
Yeah.
right? If you're unless you're in the oyster business, why are you there?
Right, exactly. And I think by the 16th century, certainly by the 17th century, transatlantic and transoceanic trade was being established via ship. Cotton and tobacco being moved in slavery, obviously, but also manufactured goods. I mean, that was part of the way the colonies interacted with the British Empire.
Mm-hmm.
But really, most travel internally was via river and constrained by where the rivers went. And so if your coal mine was if you were lucky enough to have your coal mine be near to a river.
Can you imagine? That was probably how they said good luck in the olden times.
May your coal mine
be near a river.
We could bring that back.
I wish you many goods and cheese and a coal mine near a river.
But if your factory was located elsewhere for what could be
A supply reason, a historical
that's
reason.
right, a lot of reasons. I mean, if you need two things, coal and iron ore,
They might not be in the same place.
That's right.
Might not be a river there.
if you think about the way that rivers have played a role in I guess human civilization. I mean,
Let's give it up for the lowly river.
you know what? Here's to you, our friend the river.
Old man.
No, do the whole song.
That would be a hate crime.
Rivers were being improved upon.
How can you improve upon a river?
Well, because rivers are not always designed best to move boats up and down.
They could be too shallow for a boat. They could have rapids.
They often have a flood season and a low season.
Right.
And if you're
They're wiggly, so
They're
it takes very
wiggly.
long to
That's
get
right.
down them. Like you're covering what should be a mile, and you're going
Exactly.
like when I walk my dogs.
If you go down, it's real easy. If you go back up, it's really
Pay
hard.
for it later on the way back up.
The earliest sort of attempts to tame rivers were mostly about building weirs or little coffer dams or dams that would impound a certain amount of water, either to control flooding, but also to create sort of calmer
Less seasonal, less
sections.
current.
and water wheels were often a source of like a reason to manipulate the flow of the river in order to direct water over to the water wheel. But the ancient Egyptians and I mean by ancient, I guess I mean a couple hundred years BC. And then
It's pretty ancient.
the Song Dynasty Chinese, they were all experimenting with locks, which kind of enable you to travel.
Right. Once you got a weir, how do you get your boat down there?
That's right. And in most cases, and this is something that, because the locks here in Seattle are a big part of our kind of Seattle.
Civic life.
Yeah, we love the locks, and we all go down there a couple times a year at least to look at the salmon coming up and
seals eating the salmon, and
enjoy the experience of watching a boat go up or down.
it is pretty fun. I have to say, like, I know I'm a middle-aged guy, so this should be right down the plate for me, but I was not expecting it to be that fun to watch boats go slowly up or slowly down.
Yeah. And all the bells that ring and
There's a lot of preparing for it to go up and down,
Yep.
tying boats to things, getting boats near other boats, setting off several bells.
once the telephones that we carry in our pockets had stop motion
Yes.
cameras, I can't go to the locks without making a little movie where it's like a fast motion.
Zick.
Look, the boats are going up. The boats are going down. It's pretty lame. It's pretty dull.
That's good.
Dull man.
Mr. Rogers could show it on that little weird little TV window he has in his house. Picture.
Those kinds of locks are known as pound locks.
Pound locks.
Yeah, they actually let you traverse quite a gradient. You know, that's how the Panama Canal works. Like you can go kind of up over a mountain and down.
Pound just refers to the degree of elevation change?
Well, no, pound it refers to the impoundment of water between the two locks. So
I see.
prior to the pound lock, really what a lot of the locks were what are known as flash locks, which are, you've got a weir that's sort of blocking off the water's kind of flowing over the top of the weir, but it's impounded water behind it. And the boats would all stack up. The boats going downstream would stack up, and then they would just like open the weir, and the water would all pour through.
Whoosh.
And the boats would like surf through
They get a
the
little
weir.
thrill ride.
And then the boats that were down below trying to go up would get pulled up with ropes through the torrent
Before they reclose it.
Yeah, like little like salmon at great effort, and then they would close the weir again, and that would effectively
Currently, we only use this technology at Splash Mountain.
Splash Mountain.
Yeah, only flume rides now use this.
I use it in my own creek, just trying to like.
Do you often surf yourself over the top?
Well, not
in the
not
summer?
me, but like little little rafts full of what am I moving around? Rocks, basically. I'm moving rocks.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You're sending stuff down your own little canal there in your backyard?
Pulling it up mostly. Pulling it up, less sending it down. But by the 1600s in the UK, it was a time of a lot of civic improvement, and the Thames had always been a problem, right? Because the saltwater came
tidal
up,
estuary,
and the flooding went down, and so there was. I mean, King James the First sort of set out to do some major improvements on the Thames,
Dredging and stuff?
yeah, dredging and putting in weirs. By the late 16th or 17th, the late 17th century, there had been 30 different improvements on the river, and there were a lot of other sort of rivers in England that were getting some of that treatment. There was the River Wey, and there were canals being constructed, but they were mostly canals that were rivers that were being canaled, so channeled and turned into more of a civic waterway, a useful waterway rather than a windy river.
Fewer bends, better depths for everybody, but it follows where a river kind of was.
Yeah, the Mersey and the Trent, these were all being improved, and by the late 1700s, the canal system had been improved to the degree that anywhere you lived in England, you were within 15 miles of some kind of waterway that could be used for transportation.
Is that too many canals?
Well, as we'll see, there were more canals to come.
This isn't even, we're not even to the Mania yet. This
No.
is just regular.
This is just regular.
Good interest, good level of canal interest.
And canals are being built all over Europe. Belgium and the Netherlands were kind of...
They were already interested in earthworks and
they were
waterworks.
pretty into it. By the mid-1400s, canals were being built. Milan was installing pound locks during the Renaissance.
Venice's canals must be old, right?
Well, Venice's canals were, if you think about original Venice, it was just an archipelago.
It's a lagoon, yeah.
Yeah.
The canals are just water.
Yeah, and it was more as they filled in the land to...
That's the opposite thing. They didn't have to dig canals.
Exactly.
They just were like, we'll just put city until everything's left and we'll call it a canal.
Yeah, they had to leave canals. But toward the end of the 1700s, England was beginning this explosive growth that we call the Industrial Revolution.
Not making its first omnibus appearance.
Not making its first omnibus appearance. That's right.
People know.
We love the Industrial Revolution.
I mean, it had some downsides.
Name one. The aqueduct.
I don't know. Didn't all those kids, the child laborers that
Yeah, but I mean, they're long gone.
they're, I don't know. Yeah, they are long gone.
Yeah, I mean,
Sooner than they would have been without the Industrial Revolution in many cases.
Maybe coal lung
Yeah.
was bad. Yeah, there's probably some PCBs still in the soil up there in Glasgow.
I don't want to be a... Yeah.
No, there are a lot of downsides to the Industrial Revolution. You don't want to be an Industrial Revolution truther.
Which side is the truther? I don't know. What's the conventional wisdom about the Industrial Revolution?
We'll let our listeners decide.
We wouldn't get cheap IKEA furniture without it.
The thing about the Industrial Revolution is all of a sudden there was a lot of stuff to move around, not just the products of these factories, but all the raw materials, as I suggested, right? If you're building some kind of steel sewing machines, you need coal and steel and iron coal and chromium steel.
Yeah, right.
As
Billy Joel taught us.
Yeah, you need all the stuff, and then you need to get those sewing machines to market. And following river roads was really insufficient. It wasn't how you got the coal to the iron, and so the first, what they call pure canals, purpose-built canals that aren't following rivers but are a canal as a roadway, started to get built in about 1757. The first one that we think of as beginning the canal era is the Sankey Canal, which was built in 1757.
It was filled with Sanka instead of water.
It was, why don't the people of the Midlands like my coffee?
They never have 2 cups at home.
It went from St. Helens to Widnes, and it initially kind of sort of sparked what's another, like ignited the Widnes chemical industry.
Can I get a witness?
By enabling this kind of transportation on a scale that a horse-drawn cart just wasn't capable of. And horse-drawn carts not only can carry a very limited amount of weight, but also this was an era kind of largely unimproved roads. All it takes is a rainstorm. Everybody's bogged down. There's no way to accomplish what would be the economies of scale.
That's the bottleneck. You can make stuff fast, you can sell stuff fast, but you can't move it fast. But the real sort of canal that kicked the whole game into high gear was the Bridgewater Canal. The Bridgewater Canal was designed to take coal to Manchester. Manchester being... That's the opposite of coal to Newcastle.
That's right.
Newcastle doesn't need the coal, but Manchester does.
Manchester does. Newcastle over here, Manchester over there.
Right.
And the Bridgewater Canal was entirely funded by the 3rd Duke of Bridgewater, a man by the name of Francis Egerton.
Well, he's got an amazing name for a canal, like Bridgewater.
Bridgewater.
He could be the Duke of a lot of dumb-sounding places, but
Right.
that guy is like that guy's name is made to be a canal.
And
Sounds like a hobbit.
He controlled both sides of the equation, right? He controlled...
He had mines and plants?
Yeah, that's right. And so he was building this as a private enterprise in order to move this stuff to where he needed it downriver.
It's the equivalent of like a shuttle bus service in an office park or something, because it's not meant to... That's interesting to think of it as private. It's not meant to be part of the landscape, really. So could people use his private canal?
Well, at first, he funded this whole thing himself. There was no no corporation. He didn't raise money to do it. There actually had been there'd been a few speculative bubbles prior to this, enough that in 1720, as a result of a speculative bubble overseas, within the British Empire, that the Parliament passed the Bubble Act of 1720 that said specifically that you needed, if you were going to charter a corporation, you needed to get a charter from the Crown. It needed to be approved by the Crown. You couldn't just start a corporation and sell stock without approval from Parliament.
The SEC of its day.
Right. And so the Duke of Bridgewater didn't need this approval.
Because he's a duke?
Because he's a duke, and he's
his own money.
And it's his own money. And so he builds this canal, and he contracted a man by the name of James Brindley to build it. And Brindley was this kind of polymath engineer who studied the whole route of it and built it, rather than connecting it to rivers and existing waterways. He actually built it so that it didn't need any locks. It just flowed downhill the whole way. And in order to accomplish it, he actually had to put the canal in an aqueduct and take it over the river.
He's got water going over water.
So water going over water.
And he's like, we'll make it up. Like it's more expensive to build, but we'll make it up through the life of the canal. It'll be so easy to get, it's so direct and no locks. And
exactly. And in fact, the canal then went through a tunnel. So aqueduct and then tunnel to its final destination. And it was extremely expensive.
Sounds expensive.
It cost £170,000 in $1760, which is about 33 million pounds today, although I think at that point, hard to...
Right. It's not apples to oranges, because for that, you could build one subway stop today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it had a tremendous and immediate effect. Suddenly, coal was widely available in Manchester. The price of coal in Manchester dropped to such an extent that industry exploded.
He was the only guy that could give it to you at that price.
That's right. And Bridgewater paid off the whole expense in under a year. Like it paid for itself almost immediately.
This may be tangential to stuff we've talked about in a different omnibus entry, but like not that much, right? I feel like most of this is new to me.
I mean, as we've seen, there will always be some futureling who's like, in episode 380, they talked about canal barges for 11 minutes, and this all feels very familiar.
Please tell us what that is, because we can't remember, and we don't care that much. But we'll pretend to be interested when you tell us.
No, I'm very interested. And in fact, the Bridgewater Canal to this day remains privately owned. As we'll see, the rest of the canals subsequent all became part of a multiple iterations of a British transit or transportation network that was part of the it was nationalized at one point, but the Bridgewater Canal, privately funded, privately operated, even unto this day. And eventually, the Bridgewater Canal did connect various other canals that were built around Manchester. Manchester had this unusual position in that it was and is 40 miles from the sea. Not a town that you would think of as a port. But
why is it there?
Well, Manchester was in such competition with Liverpool as an industrial center and hated being dependent on Liverpool as a seaport. And through this era of canal building, Manchester went to great expense to build canals and large canals connecting it to the ocean, such that it became the third largest port in the UK.
So it could bypass Liverpool entirely?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
it's kind of it looks like it's on a bluff here around river. So it's one of these places that was a fort.
Yeah, right.
Not a port.
A fort, not a port.
Yeah, were you a fort or a port?
So the Duke did need to, in order to construct this, because these massive projects, right, they're going across a lot of public land, and he did need to get acts of parliament in order to create these canals.
Access to the land.
And an act of parliament then was necessary for every canal that got built. You needed to go to parliament and make the case that your canal was necessary. Bridgewater continued to expand. They opened kind of multiple different connecting spurs, and at each new construction project, they got a subsequent Bridgewater Canal Act. It did become a corporation. People were investing money in it and getting incredible returns, between 13 and 23% returns on investment, because the Bridgewater Canal began to charge tolls on other people using the canal. So it wasn't just that Bridgewater himself was benefiting from this infrastructure, but it became like a public resource.
And they can charge basically whatever they want. They're the only canal.
So part of what Parliament did was it said you cannot own the canal and the boats. You can't monopolize the canals. So if you build the canal, it has to be open to all boats. And that is why the canal owners charged tolls. That was how they could profit from their investment. Seeing how profitable it was and recognizing that this was a new necessity, because factories were springing up everywhere, raw materials were being processed at an extraordinary rate, it became, even in spite of the Bubble Act, it was seen as a kind of surefire investment that you put in, that that sort of anyone could put in some small to medium amount of money into this, and it would not only pay off in a remarkably short amount of time, but then continue to pay pretty large dividends. And this was, the Industrial Revolution was the beginning of the middle class in Britain.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of one of the what became known as a canal mania was partly driven by the first opportunity for people to really gain
To
wealth.
speculate, yeah. I guess I think when Omnibus covers mania, it's usually, Omnibus loves a mania, but it's usually you. If there's an omnibus about mulberry mania or fern mania or dancing mania, you're the guy that likes a good mania.
I do like a good mania. It does feel like, well, and some of the bad mania too, the
Megalomania?
well, and the Tylenol manias and the
Just
population manias.
Mass hysterias.
Mass hysteria, dogs and cats sleeping together.
I guess when I think in my lifetime about things that seemed like this, of like, you can't lose money on this, it just keeps paying out. It's things like, everybody putting money in internet stocks in the late 90s, or everybody flipping houses in the mid 2000s. It does seem like the kind of thing that's often unsustainable when you start to hear, everybody put your money here. It's guaranteed to just make you money forever.
Well, the 90s tech boom stock bubble is 100% analogous to...
Oh, yeah?
Just in the sense that, it seems like a sure bet, and we're building out...
This is our new
That's right.
This is the new highway.
Yeah, it's an information superhighway.
It's a canal highway or it's pets.com highway. But
Exactly. So from the 1770s to the 1830s, over like 6,500 kilometers of new canals were built across the UK. Really going from everywhere to everywhere. Canals, and many of them like great construction projects involving enormous sort of pound locks. There's a place in the UK that I've seen with my own eyes where a canal on a viaduct goes over another canal, which goes over a railway. And it's like they all cross at the same like intersection.
Well, if these are all being built by different concerns, I mean, that happened with the rush for like underground trains in London, and it turned out to not be sustainable. It turned out that's not how you want a network to work, for everybody to just be digging their own thing. I wonder, did that happen here too?
Well, it did. And what ended up happening was there were a lot of canals proposed where because the Bubble Act was repealed in 1825.
Ah, good. You got the right people in Parliament.
And that's right.
Bubbles are back, baby.
Laissez-faire. But there were a lot of situations where someone said, oh, well, we're going to build a canal from Eggleston to Egglesworth. And there wasn't really the need.
You could find investors, but they're not going to make any money because... Yeah.
Right. And people were pouring their life savings into these things. And then often the canal didn't even get built, or it got half built and operated at a loss.
This is analogous to the .com boom. Because it's like, look, there's going to be some place where you can buy pet food on the internet. Like, you don't want to get left behind, right?
That's exactly right.
Like, we've got the URL and the investors. Let's get this started.
The first one to really kind of spectacularly fail was the Croydon Canal, which was finished in 1809 and operated. It never was completed to the extent that it was originally designed. It didn't really connect kind of raw materials to an industrial center or factories to a port. It just sort of...
just a line in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it couldn't really sustain itself and eventually lost money to the point that they actually appealed to Parliament for an act to dissolve the corporation or the canal.
But they weren't like, we're too big to fail, finish our canal? At the time, that was not yet in style.
At the time, it was not yet in style, and they were not too big to fail. And it seemed that a lot of people a lot of these canals were kind of limping along like any bubble, like the commercial real estate bubble in Seattle. In fact, there's a kick the can down the road, kind of like, well, this is certainly going to solve itself by next quarter, and writing it off is going to be hard enough that we should just keep trying to build the market, connect it to something else, But after this massive explosion, and the thing is that canals still were far and away more efficient in moving material because one horse could pull 30 tons on a barge.
It's like getting a super horse. Like some kind of alien planet that has super horses?
It's like getting a super horse. Now, unfortunately, one thing that was not predicted was that in the mid-1800s, there was a massive pandemic.
I thought you were going to say super horses were discovered or something.
No, the opposite. A massive pandemic that killed all the horses.
Oh, no.
Which
so suddenly your barge is no good.
Yeah, that's right. But more than anything, what put an end to Canal Mania exactly, or, Canal Mania in that sense, was predictably the invention of the railway. And this happened in the United States. There was a canal mania here, although the distances were much greater. But American canals,
we called it Canalapalooza.
The Erie Canal was completed in 1825 and kind of was the most famous success, although there were canals built all across the Midwest. The Wabash Canal through Indiana was completed in 1843. And canals actually made a big difference in the exploration or in the expansion to the west of the United States. And although we've talked about canals in the U.S. as all opening right as the railway came in and made them obsolete, the canal that connects, the Monongahela to the Ohio, it's a really short canal, but it allows you to take goods from Pittsburgh all the way down the Mississippi to.
And maybe nowadays we don't even think of it as a canal, right? We just think of that as part of the Monongahela.
Yeah. But it took a long time before the railroad was capable of carrying the tonnage that a barge is able to. And even now, of course, a ship can carry 1,000 trains worth of stuff. But the railroads, as they gained in popularity, as they gained in success, there followed on the heels of the canal mania a railway mania, where all exactly the same speculation.
We can't lose now. It's railroads.
Massive railroads being built everywhere on the flimsiest of pretenses, people putting all of their middle-class savings into the railroad boom, and finding that the railroads also kind of a lot of those speculative railroads fell apart and people lost all their money. But one of the things that the successful railroads did as they got political backing, because the canals were seen as kind of an asset of the moneyed classes, because they were mostly built at a time before the capitalism of the mid-19th century. And so the owners were aristocrats.
It was just like having a lot of forests you could
Right.
hunt in or fell for fields or something.
Whereas the railroads and the speculation around them was part of this mid-19th century middle class
It's
money.
robber barons now.
And what the railroads did was they went in and started to buy the canal, not just the canal companies, but the canals.
Did they just wanted the right-of-ways?
They wanted the right-of-ways. They often built railroads alongside the canal, but they also eliminated competition by just buying the canals and shutting them down.
Now we have the only way into town.
Right. And so canals... Go ahead.
I would put in the railroad, but I would have the train pull the barge instead of the horse. See?
And the thing is that after the horses all died, they switched the canal barges over to steam engines.
Right.
Which was polluting and awful.
Coincidentally, steamboats came into vogue right at the time the horses died. Coincidence?
Hey.
Yeah, if you believe that.
That's right.
I got a canal in Iggleswort to sell you.
That's right. Later on, we realized that the people promoting steam power were horse murderers.
Robert Fulton was just going around like killing so many horses.
But so the canals, although they fell on hard times, they were still economically viable in a lot of cases. In most of Western Europe, all of the canals we think of in the Netherlands and Belgium and around the Rhine, they had all been modernized and expanded and are still really a main way of transporting all kinds of things in those Low Countries.
They still get used, huh?
In the UK, a lot of those canals, with the dawn of railroad mania, didn't get modernized. And so a lot of the canals that do survive in the UK are old-fashioned, like narrow, as you've seen, narrow.
Kind of comically like model railroad layout looking canals.
Right. But
like Legoland canals.
Like big infrastructure projects of this kind, and the Manchester Ship Canal that we discussed a little bit earlier, that was a project that didn't really get completed until the late 1880s. So long after the railroads had superseded canal travel, Manchester was still asserting itself as a seaport by constructing these giant waterworks or water projects to allow them to take their stuff directly to the oceans and not have to go through Liverpool. So by the 20th century, although there was still quite a bit of canal traffic, it was a fraction of what it had been, but there was still a lot being transported. And during World War I, there was a brief resurgence of using canals just because there was so much material that needed to be schlepped. It was really in the 1930s when trucking became a new way of moving goods from everywhere to everywhere, that trucking sort of dealt the final blow to the canal system being really viable.
I'm thinking about this 30s movie kind of set on the barges of France, and I realized the way it's portrayed, it really is almost like trucker culture of its time. You know, you've got these kind of blue-collared, you know, rough and tumble guys in charge of getting a load of whatever, you know, to the end of the, in this case, river, not highway. But, you know, it very much feels like trucker culture. It's not Smokey and the Bandit, but it's like early trucker culture, but it's guys on barges, and that all went away.
Well, and that culture developed after the introduction of the railroads, when barging and canals tried to undercut the price of railroads by being really a cheap method of moving stuff because it was slower.
Yeah.
And bargemen were paid so little that the only way they could survive was to take their whole family and their whole life onto the canal.
Right.
So the barges became
their house also.
Yeah, their house, and they raised their kids there. And at that, then bargemen became a kind of separate traveler community.
This never happened in trucking.
Sure it did.
Times get so bad the drivers are raising their kids in the back of the cab.
Oh, maybe not their kids. You're right, but you know,
You could travel with your old lady.
trucker culture for sure.
I'm sure there's some CV nickname for your wife being in the cab with you.
Yeah, well, it's a bumper sticker on the outside that says "No lot lizards."
No lot lizards.
Yeah, no lot lizards.
I always wondered why they weren't coming to me. I guess I must have that sticker.
Yeah, well, they look at you and they're like, "Nope, nope." They tap each other on the shoulder and go, "Nope."
Not even a lot lizard would come to me.
But even into the mid-century, the mid-1900s, 1950s, in other words, a lot of those canals had survived. Many of them were silted in, but they hadn't been actively destroyed. The railroads did often kind of appeal to Parliament and say, "Hey, we would actually like to drain the canal and just build our railroad."
Yeah,
like
fill it.
There, it's the perfect railroad situation. And Parliament often said no. But in 1948, and this is the part of the show that's briefly compatible with Marxism,
Finally.
the UK nationalized all transportation. They nationalized the railroads and they nationalized the canals under the British Transport Commission. And the British Transport Commission was charged with keeping the canals running as part of the British transportation infrastructure as long as it wasn't too expensive. And the British Transport Commission, in true Robert Moses mid-century style, determined that it was too expensive, or it was not as useful as building motorways.
Probably accurately, right? If you're just going by usage.
And then in 1956, Britain passed a Clean Air Act, which took coal kind of out of the equation, and moving coal around was a big part of what supported the barge industry. And so from that point on, canals were getting filled in. Some of the big English motorways are actually built on top of old canal routes. The British Transport Commission did not do the canal system a lot of favors. And by 1962, there was a kind of split up of the transportation realms, and there was a Transport Act passed that transferred ownership of the canals to British waterways, which you would think would have been an organization that devoted itself to preserving the canals, or at least finding a use for them.
Right.
But unfortunately, in 1962, it was also a really harsh winter, and so British Waterways took over the canals. Just a terrible coincidence. The winter that all the canals froze and all the boats were frozen in place and couldn't do any work.
It's funny, this is the first time I'm thinking of it, but yeah, a canal is not as good year-round as any other form of transportation, right? I mean, roads could ice up, but you could still get a horse car down them. But like the 18th and 19th centuries were cooler than the 20th and the 21st. There must have been lots of times of the winter where canals were just nothing.
Yeah, it's all screwed up. And so British Waterways did not have a very they weren't
bad timing.
Yeah, they weren't incentivized to find a way to, find a new way for the canals to be economically viable. But as you can imagine, as the 70s wore on to the 80s, as was true in so many ways in kind of post-industrial West, a lot of those, just like the abandoned warehouses on the Lower East Side and just like the entire city of Seattle up until 1999, those spaces were starting to be reclaimed by versions of urban pioneers and people who recognized kind of the quaintness of living on a boat rather than it being, there was a middle class that could afford to, the scions of the middle class could afford to live like bohemians. But there was also...
That's not enough to keep an infrastructure alive, right?
No, but there was a recognition that it was more than an industrial infrastructure, that it had by this point in time become kind of a natural wonder.
Tourist attraction.
There were a lot fewer canals by 1975 than there were in 1825. It went from about 6,500 kilometers to about 2,000, between kilometers and miles. What am I trying to say? It was less than half of the waterways still existed. Mm-hmm. But there then was a kind of environmental movement and a cultural environmental movement to preserve the canals that were left. And independent nonprofits kind of sprung up to keep canals from being filled in. I mean, a lot of canals
in their area.
Yeah, canals got filled in and just housing built on top of it because there were all these as booms, housing booms and growth booms happened in the 80s and 90s. There was still, canals were at risk. British Waterways eventually transferred ownership of the canals to a nonprofit, the Canal and River Trust. And the Canal and River Trust now is maybe the first real steward of the canal system that's interested in preserving them as a national resource, reopening them potentially as a source of
just recreational
transportation. I mean, people, not just Airbnbs, but actually using it to move people around. And now I think throughout the UK, there's kind of like we here in the West are starting to, Western United States are trying to tear down all of our old dams that don't work anymore and let the salmon come back. There's a similar desire to find some of those abandoned canals, and if they haven't been turned into motorways, dredge them and reopen them and try and maybe for the first time in over a century expand the canal system.
guess there could be an environmental case, not unlike the salmon here. Maybe even if they weren't wetlands or aquatic ecosystems 1,000 years ago, they could be today after a century of disrepair.
That's right.
Maybe those are really valuable natural areas.
And I don't get the sense that, well, none of the canal boats I saw were still powered by coal. And probably if you were converting any means of conveyance to electric power, one of those super slow, super skinny canal boats would maybe not be a bad option. Certainly it's not like you're hauling ass.
You're if you live on a canal, you want a slow pace of life, right?
That's right. Yeah, when I think about if I were to retire to the UK, I mean, there are worse things than puttering around 2,000 miles of canal. It's still a pretty good tour.
You're gonna boat your way across Europe next?
Yeah, well, now that
did I ever tell you about the time I floated across Europe? And that concludes Canal Mania, entry 178.PR0516, certificate number 27217 in the Omnibus, which was at Omnibus Project for some reason on various social media platforms. We were at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick at a time when that seemed fun. But then it all went away.
Once a long time ago.
There's still futurelings on Facebook to hang out with. Nowadays, it's mostly a place to go and like marvel at weird things John said, I guess. We have a whole Facebook group for that. It's called Futurelings.
People are like, he can't be serious.
Specializes in making drinking games out of your every utterance.
He didn't mean it that way, surely.
That should be instead of calling it Futurelings, it should be called He Didn't Mean It That Way. Maybe that could be your memoir.
How could he possibly know about this, but not know about that?
I saw that one today. People really want you to know more about the Ask Historians subreddit. And it's because at root, you are not a Redditor.
I'm not.
You make fun of me for going on Reddit as you're like cruising 8chan.
Yeah.
Reddit, that's for weirdos. Hold on, let me just put it.
Yeah, well, really into anime over here.
Who wouldn't be? You could send us email at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. Remember, tell us which of our other entries we are is it plagiarizing if it's your own work? That was the John Fogerty case, right?
Oh, right. He was just rewriting his own songs.
We're rewriting our old podcasts because, Scooter Braun owns the masters. So we just need to re-record every old omnibus entry and the law can't touch us.
That's right. They can't touch us.
Canal Mania, John's version. You can also mail us physical items. Why not?
What do you got over there? Looks like you got a mailbag.
Yeah, you don't let me open stuff during the show, so now we get lots of sound effects during the outro. So this is a very disturbing... it looks like somebody put our pictures through some kind of like an Instagram or Snapchat filter.
What now?
That makes us look like...
Whoa! What makes you look like you're 14, and what does it make me? It just makes me look like I actually have my eyes open.
It just looks like maybe we're women, or
definitely
like little Golden Book illustrations.
I mean, we both have eyeliner on,
yes,
which I like,
but it doesn't look goth in any way. We just kind of look like young moms.
Yeah,
except you have a beard.
Young moms, except I have a beard. Yeah.
Has anybody ever wanted to see us as young moms? Probably not.
You should put that picture up on our.
I will make sure not to deface it. And what's inside? Oh, look at this.
It's a peachy.
Yes.
What's in the peachy?
Dave says, while going through an old box, he found a completely undoodled peachy.
It's a real peachy too. Look at it. It's got the original tennis player. On
the inner flap, he's written me in big letters over the place where you're supposed to put your name, home address, phone, school, subject, instructor, period, time, and remarks. Huh. Can you imagine? I think this would have been me in high school. I would have been like, English, period, 2, instructor, Mr. Bird, time, 8:38.
Yeah, we'll go on Reddit and post it for your Reddit friends.
I know your anarchist 8chan friends would be bullying me because I was not into the right kind of tentacle porn. Also,
there's no wrong kind of tentacle porn.
Also included is some precious metal I purchased after Reagan was elected.
What does that mean? Precious metal.
The enclosed 5 Troy gram ingot of silver is guaranteed.
Kidding.
Complete with a certificate of authenticity from North American Minerals Limited in Hicksville, New York. And then it's in a little baggie, a tiny bit of, it's Indian Tigress Emerald? Why is there a certificate for a silver ingot and then a tiny emerald?
Well, let me see. What do you got going over? I'm the numismatist here.
Yeah, why don't you take a look at Dave's find?
Okay, well, we've got the certificate for the silver, but no silver.
And then
a
there's
tiny emerald
a little
in a
emerald
bag.
with no certificate.
I like...
it looks like maybe the folks in Hicksville, New York sent him the wrong... certificate.
Oh yeah, this is from 1980, so this would have been right in the Hunt Brothers silver boom.
Oh, interesting. He didn't buy this. He won it as some contest, as a prize in some contest, and this was 5th prize.
The silver?
Or emerald, it's unclear.
But where's the silver?
I don't know. He says he included some metal, but all we have is an emerald and then a certificate saying that it's silver.
Did you really look in there?
I'm looking right now. Do you think if it's
So the Hunt Brothers, the crash happened on March 27th, and this silver arrived on November 8th.
Here it is. It's the ingot. It's a very good ingot.
Is it?
It's a high quality ingot.
Well, look at that ingot.
I mean, we've seen bad craftsmanship ingots before, but this one's pretty good.
So on January 1st, 1979, it was $50 an ounce.
And this is what, 5 Troy grams?
5 grams. So how much is 5 grams worth? Or no, I'm sorry. Is this? Yeah, 5 grams. If silver's $50 an ounce.
If a train leaves Pittsburgh, one Troy ounce is 31 grams. So if this is 5 grams, it's about 1/6 of an ounce. Is that right?
Okay.
And gold is what, $50 an ounce?
Yeah, so it's worth less than $10, $8, maybe.
Maybe. Does it say? Does the lettering say on that it's a fifth place prize? Because that's what Dave doesn't know what the contest was, but he knows that it was 5th place.
Nope. This is.
No, the ingot itself.
Oh no. The ingot just is from an assayer's.
And there's nothing in the packaging.
No, a familiar assayer's J&M. And it's a handsome
I don't like when an
guy.
assayer is a little too familiar with me.
Is that right?
Yeah, don't get familiar with me.
Well, but
you know your place, assayer.
The thing is, you want an assayer that you know. You don't want like some assayer that's working out of a bathroom
but I
somewhere.
still want his respect, you know?
I see.
Don't get familiar with me. And then 2 $500 dong notes from Vietnam.
Oh, $50 dong.
Oh, South Vietnamese. So this is very old currency. One for each. Share and share alike, John. Here you go.
Nice. I'll add it to my wonderful collection of bills from around the world.
Maybe Dave should have taken his $8 in early 80s silver and turned it into $8 and, got a quarter pounder and a drink. I feel a little bit bad that he sent it to us. What are we going to do with it?
I mean, in the 80s, I mean, what how much is silver today? The silver spot
it's true.
price.
That was the value then.
The silver spot price today is $32 an ounce. So this is 1/6 of an ounce. Is that what you were saying?
That seems to be about right. What did you say it was, 5 grams?
5 grams.
Yeah, that seems to be about 1/6 of an ounce. So it's worth less than it was then? Is that right?
Yeah.
Should have sold the second they gave that to you, Dave. The second they were like, good job with your 5th place. It's unclear. Science fair volcano, prize zucchini. We don't know what it was.
No, it's worth
Afghan.
It's worth like $5 now. $5.50. So he sent it to us as a gesture of goodwill and kindness, and
I appreciate it.
It's a beautiful thing.
I just feel like, unlike this peachy folder, it's a negotiable instrument.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I'll tell you what. If you don't want it, I'll give you $5. Oh no, I'll give you $2.50 for it.
I think it's yours. Sold. Your house probably has a lot more weird metals stocked away.
Yeah,
than mine does.
You're not wrong.
Didn't I have scissors here? This other package is very thoroughly wrapped, and we're not cutting a second of this out. This is gold.
Yeah, gold,
Jerry.
Silver and gold.
We went from the silver to audio gold. There we go. Oh, is this going to be nothing? Is this going to be something I'm supposed to sign?
It's just another photograph of you, dear Ken.
I did just get one of those. No, this is from Sharon, who sent it. Well, look at this, priority mail, and the whole thing stamped with the Alex Trebek stamp. But the problem is those are just first class mail stamps. So it took 15 of them, I think, to get this to us. It looked like she was going to send it in this envelope, and then some kindly postal clerk told her it'll probably be cheaper if you just stick into one of those priority mailers. So now I'm opening the second envelope. We are entering the second tomb. Hope this is not the one that has the curse. What did I do with those scissors? They were right here. We have a third envelope. No, I'm just kidding. No, we don't. We have a book of some description. Sharon has a friend, a client who wrote a book years ago that deals with some history. She says we've danced around on the show.
Uh-oh.
Her friend Art Kleiner, who wrote it, started out writing for the Whole Earth catalog.
Why don't we get to the point?
Which is omnibus adjacent. The problem is he apparently moved on from the Whole Earth catalog, like I'm sure so many of those guys did, to write a book about the history of corporate management.
The Age of Heretics.
This is from that business section of the bookstore I've never been in. What bookstore section do you think you've been in the least?
Self-help?
Yeah.
Or sports?
New Age spirituality?
Yeah, no, I don't go anywhere near that. I don't even want to walk down that because it might get on me.
I don't like the human sexuality section, not because I'm repressed, but because, like, who is just hanging out there? Who's just reading sex books in a Walden Books, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, people that go into the sex psychology racket are dangerous thugs.
This book is very the pages are a nice, like, taupe color. This book must have come out either on low quality paper or a long time ago or both.
It's foxed.
It's foxed. 2008. Oh, and it's signed to Sharon. Now I feel bad.
Oh.
We have her signed copy. If Art and Sharon go on to do something famous in conjunction or even apart, this will be very valuable.
Well, I mean, she liked it enough to send it to us, but not enough to keep it.
It does not appear to have ever been read. The binding's nice and tight. Sharon, why don't you write a little book report for us on... and because she likes Weird Facts podcasts like ours, little reductionist.
True.
She wants us to know that in Swiss German, there are 140 words for the heel of a bread loaf.
No.
It seems very unlikely.
140 words.
Here's the problem with that math. How many times in your life have you referred to the heel of a bread loaf? I bet it's fewer than 140. Most people will never get to use them all in their lifetime.
We're not Germans, and they are dealing with bread, I think, in a different way. But yeah, generally I say to my mom, do you want the heel? And she says, yeah.
But if you were Swiss German, you would have a vast panoply of words to choose from.
Yeah, mother heel, child heel, moldy heel.
If you are Swiss German, do you think it's like Inuit words for snow? Like this is the word for the yellow snow that is left where the sled dogs have slept.
This
is the tight, powdery snow that becomes the top of the igloo.
I really feel like there are not 140 words for snow, that whole thing is drastically overstated.
If we are speaking to any Swiss Germans right now,
especially any Swiss Germans from the Arctic.
First of all, we wish you many goods and cheese, because I know that's what you love.
Second of all, how many words are there really?
If you can name... If any individual Swiss German listening to this can name more than 20, I will allow for the fact that there could be 140.
Okay, good.
But if nobody can name more than 1/7 of them,
Yeah, right.
right?
Then they don't exist.
Like if let's say you and I could think of like 10 words in English to mean beautiful. That might mean there's 50.
Well, in German, of course, there are compound words. So so there's going to be a word for dry bread heel, warm bread heel, Sunday's bread heel.
But they're not going to be in a dictionary.
Your mother's
right?
bread heel. I mean, maybe.
Your mother's bread heel. I'm going to start saying that.
Your mother's bread heel.
And of course, the most important thing you can do to support Omnibus, you can definitely send us your friends' 15-year-old business bestsellers.
Yes.
Why not?
Yes.
If you don't do that, what kind of a listener are you? But if you don't have one of those at hand and you think, I'd like to give Ken and John a little treat. You know who could you deserve a little treat?
Yeah.
Those guys.
Yeah. A little treat.
Go to...
It's not a treat, though. It's real. It's a real investment in real goods and services.
Yes.
Services
that
primarily.
flow to you. I guess the goods flow to us. Mm-hmm. We get whatever, the $5 a month.
And then the service flows from us.
An additional monthly addenda show, early ad-free access to every week. There's higher levels that have T-shirts and whatnot. All kinds of perks and privileges available to those who support the show at patreon.com/omnibusproject. Little thought experiment. Even if you don't think that you're a podcast donor, why not just to fill 45 seconds of your day, go right now to patreon.com/omnibusproject and see what you think. See if anything there tempts you. You may surprise yourself and become one of our most loyal supporters, willing to do really all manner of crimes in our name.
And I just want to point out, even if you don't think you will ever listen to an addenda show, or
they actively annoy you,
or go on and look at any of this stuff, you do listen to Omnibus.
You must be.
So,
really, who would be more likely to listen to an addenda show than you?
Well, that, but also, even if you never do, pitch us a couple of bucks anyway.
Because you've listened to this.
Yeah, you're listening to us right now.
It's not interesting.
This is
it's not good or interesting in any way, but you're listening to it for some reason.
We stopped being interesting 20 minutes ago, arguably an hour and 20 minutes ago.
I'm like, it's a little flattering to you to say 20 minutes ago, but.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.